Once upon a time in a kingdom, there lived a very wealthy man named Mr. Smith. He had so much money that he never had to worry about anything. Whatever he desired, he could get it right away. In fact, he even had a special button installed in his bedroom that would summon his servants at the mere touch of a button. And they would appear immediately to do whatever he wanted. One day, Mr. Smith was lying in bed and started thinking about how much wealthier he could be if he had a lot more buttons like that one. But then he had an idea. Why not have a button that doesn't just summon a servant, but does all the work for me? He shared this idea with his wife, and she loved it. She knew her husband well enough to know that if something crossed his mind, he would not rest until he had done it. His wife suggested, "My dear husband, why don't we start with a simple example like having a button that serves us tea? You know how much you love your tea in the mornings." He agreed. So they decided to make a button that would bring him a cup of hot tea whenever he wanted. He called his engineers and told them about the button idea. The engineers got busy working on the project and completed it within a few days. Mr. Smith was so happy when he saw it. It was a small red button. And now, whenever he wanted tea, instead of summoning a servant, he just had to press this button. As soon as he pressed it, a delicious cup of tea would appear in his hands. He really enjoyed this new invention. Then he thought, why only tea? I also like to eat sweets. So he made another button that would bring him a piece of cake or cookies whenever he wanted. Then he made a button that would bring him fresh fruits. Then he made a button that would bring him newspapers from all over the world. In fact, he made so many buttons that his entire bedroom floor was covered with them, and every single one of these buttons worked perfectly. But then one day something very strange happened. One night, while Mr. Smith was sleeping, suddenly, ding, ding! The bells rang in the middle of the night. He was confused because he didn't order anything. Ding, ding! The bells rang again. Startled by the sound, he looked down and realized that one of the buttons had been pressed. It brought a tray with 2 cups of tea onto his bed. He found this very strange. His wife wasn't a morning tea person, so who could have pressed the button? He asked his servants if any of them had entered his room that night, but they said they hadn't. Even the dog, who always snuck into his room at night, hadn't come that night. So who could it have been? Puzzled, he went back to sleep. The next night, the same thing happened again. He was awoken by the sound of the bells and found 2 cups of tea on his bedside table. This continued for several nights. Mr. Smith couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't sleep properly because every night the bells would ring and wake him up. So he decided to find out who was pressing the button. He set up a camera in his bedroom to secretly record what was happening at night. That night, as soon as the clock struck 12, he saw a little mouse scurrying around on his bed, holding a piece of bread in its mouth, and then it disappeared under the cupboard. Mr. Smith watched the recording again and again, but he couldn't understand what the mouse was doing. How could a tiny mouse lift a heavy piece of bread? He decided to place a trap on the bread to catch the mouse. Just as the clock struck 12, the mouse came out and started eating the bread, but it did not touch the trap. It finished eating the bread and disappeared. This continued for several days. Mr. Smith tried setting different types of traps, but the mouse would come out and eat the bread without getting caught. Frustrated, Mr. Smith decided to stay awake one night and see what would happen. The night was long and boring, and he started to doze off, but then suddenly he heard the familiar sound of the bells. He woke up with a start and saw the mouse standing on the button with a piece of bread in its mouth. It had pressed the button and brought itself a snack. Mr. Smith felt sorry for the smart little mouse and decided to leave some food and water out for it every night instead of trying to catch it. From that day on, Mr. Smith would leave some cheese and water out every night for the mouse, and the mouse would come and eat it. Sometimes the mouse would even let him pet it before running away. They became good friends, and Mr. Smith understood that sometimes we can learn valuable lessons from the most unexpected sources. One night, the mouse stopped coming to his room, and Mr. Smith was worried that maybe something had happened to it. But then, a few weeks later, One night when he was eating dinner with his family, suddenly, "Squeak! Squeak!" a voice came from under the table. Startled, they looked under the table and saw the little mouse sitting there. It seemed to recognize Mr. Smith and started squeaking again. "Squeak! Squeak!" it said. "Squeak! Squeak! Squeak!" Mr. Smith couldn't understand what it was saying, but he could feel that it was thanking him for the food and the friendship. As time passed, the mouse grew bigger and bigger. It was no longer a tiny mouse, but had become a huge rat. Still, it remained as gentle as before. Mr. Smith continued to feed it every night. And one day, the rat stopped coming at night and instead started visiting during the day. One day, as they were playing together, the rat suddenly disappeared. Mr. Smith searched everywhere for it, but he couldn't find it, and he started to worry that maybe something bad had happened to it. Just when he was about to give up, he heard a scratching sound coming from inside the wall. He knocked on the wall and the scratching stopped. Then he heard a faint voice coming from inside. "Squeak, squeak, squeak, squeak!" He understood that the rat was trapped inside the wall and was too big to escape. He quickly called some workers and they broke open the wall to find the rat. It was stuck and couldn't move. The workers started pulling it out of the wall, but it was too big and heavy for them. So Mr. Smith joined them and together they pulled the rat out. But as soon as they freed it, the rat suddenly bit Mr. Smith very hard on the hand. Blood started pouring out of the wound. The rat looked at him for a moment and then ran away. Mr. Smith was shocked. He couldn't believe that his friend would bite him. At first he was very upset, but then he realized that maybe the rat had bitten him because it owed him a debt of gratitude. Maybe it wanted to say, "Thank you for saving its life." He thought about how the rat had become a big part of his life and had brought him a lot of happiness. And he realized that maybe their friendship wasn't just between a human and a mouse after all. From that day on, Mr. Smith continued to respect and care for all living beings, no matter how small or insignificant they might seem. And he never forgot the valuable lessons he learned from his unusual friend, the rat.